This is William Cooper, an extremely interesting and thought-provoking writer. And this is Bill Cooper's book entitled Behold a Pale Horse. In it, he adds a piece to the puzzle of this story. It's really interesting. He says that a spacecraft called Galileo will play an extremely interesting role in the near future. This spacecraft was launched in 1985 by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and will reach the planet Jupiter by the year 1995. It is supposed to orbit the planet and then take measurements for some 3 or 4 years. Here is a current newspaper article that reports that NASA is having problems with one of Galileo's antennas. Mr. Cooper reports that in the early 1970s, he read an official government report that stated that the spacecraft will be dropped into the atmosphere of the planet in the year 1999. It is known that the spacecraft carried some 49 pounds of plutonium on board to power the craft's radios. The planet Jupiter has a very heavy atmosphere, with something like 18 million times the atmospheric pressure that the Earth has. If plutonium is subjected to high pressure, it will implode, causing an atomic explosion. And if that happens on the planet Jupiter, it'll cause the atmosphere of the planet Jupiter, which has the proper mixture of oxygen and hydrogen, to burn. I have seen somewhere that the planet Jupiter has been called a failed star. That means that it has the capability of being set on fire, and so that it will burn just like the sun. It has an atmosphere of the proper amounts of hydrogen and oxygen so that it will burn if a spark is added to the mixture. And it will be getting that spark when the spacecraft Galileo will be dropped into the intense pressure of the planet's atmosphere. So the purpose of the space probe Galileo is to cause the planet Jupiter to burn like the sun. A friend of mine is an amateur astronomer, and he told me that his computer program that reports where the stars are at any one particular time indicated that Jupiter will still be visible at midnight at the Great Pyramid of Giza near Cairo, Egypt, on January the 1st, the year 2000 AD, and that it will set low in the horizon sometime after 1 a.m. That means that anyone at the Pyramid of Giza, presuming that they have a clear night, will be able to see the planet Jupiter light up in the low horizon and will be able to watch it for about 1 hour before it sets. If you think that this is impossible, may I bring your attention to a book written by Arthur C. Clarke, perhaps this nation's best science fiction writer, entitled 2010. This is the opening scene of the movie, the title of the movie, showing the title. At the end of the movie, the planet Jupiter lights up. This is nearly the final scene of the movie when the planet lights up and the spacecraft shown off to the right of the picture, or in this case at the bottom of the picture, rushes to get away from the explosion. Mr. Clarke has written 3 books on the subject, 2001, 2010, and the final book in the trilogy, 2061. And here is that 3rd book, 2061, Odyssey 3. On page 13, notice he uses the page 13. Mr. Clarke renames Jupiter the burning planet. He now calls that planet Lucifer. There's page 13. Jupiter, the fiery birth of Lucifer, the brilliant new star. My guess is that the archaeologists will claim that after Jupiter lights up, this is the star that was to show itself again after 6,000 years. They do not want us to know that it was caused by the spacecraft Galileo so that they can claim that it was predicted nearly 6,000 years ago. But those hearing my lecture will know that the planet was set ablaze by the American government's own space agency. At the end of Mr. Clarke's movie entitled 2010, he shows still pictures of the 2 suns, one being the actual sun and the other the burning planet Jupiter in the sky. This picture shows the 2 suns burning in what appears to be Moscow. And here they are shown again near the Great Pyramid of Giza near Cairo, the 2 suns in the sky. So the burning of the planet Jupiter will act as a symbolic sign in the heavens to the world that there are now 2 gods in the universe, the Creator God and Lucifer, because Lucifer is coming to the universe in the year 2000. And to show you that this is so, we must return once again to the writings of Albert Pike in his book entitled Morals and Dogma. This is what he wrote on page 844. Ye shall be like the Elohim, meaning the God of the Bible, knowing good and evil. Had the serpent of Genesis said, and the tree of knowledge became the tree of death. For 6,000 years the martyrs of knowledge toil and die at the foot of this tree, that it may again become the tree of life. It might be remembered that the Bible said that the devil tempted Eve with this lie in the Garden of Eden, and ye shall be as gods. Satan offered man a lie, and the Masons are saying that through their initiation, they too can become gods. So the Masons believe that they too can become gods, knowing good and evil. He said this on page 567 of the same book. To prevent the light from escaping at once, the demons forbade Adam to eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, by which he would have known the empires of light and that of darkness. He obeyed, and the angel of light induced him to transgress. So Mr. Pike is saying that the triune God of the Bible are demon gods, and that Lucifer is the God of light. He has it just backwards from the teaching in the Bible. Now going back to Arthur C. Clarke, it has been reported that he has the ear of NASA, so the lighting up of the planet Jupiter is probably not their idea but his. It is quite likely that Mr. Clarke is the one who suggested that NASA send the probe to Jupiter. Now let me tie this all together with the 6,000-year pyramid inches in the Great Pyramid. This is another version of the cutaway drawing of the pyramid again. Let me point out the large room in the center of the pyramid is called the Grand Gallery. Notice that it is pointed up towards the sky. It's that large box there, a rectangular shape, just before you get to the King's Chamber in the center of the picture. And that someone should see, or could see rather, a particular section of the sky before the top layers of the pyramid were placed on top of it. Mr. Noon, the author of the book about the Great Pyramid, continued. The Grand Gallery points to the supernova, or giant stellar explosion, nearest to our solar system. The Great Pyramid's Grand Gallery is focused at this particular spot in the Earth's southern sky. So it appears that the pyramid conceals two important and concealed messages. Number one, that a great star will reappear somehow in a particular spot in the sky. And two, that occurrence will happen 6,000 years after a star exploded the first time. Let me show you the importance of the 6,000 pyramid inches in the Great Pyramid. When we write the date of February 28, 1994, for instance, we should write the letters AD after the year. The two letters AD stand for the abbreviation of Anno Domini, meaning the year of our Lord, or the number of years since the birth of Jesus in the year 0. It is an interesting fact that Jesus was not born in the year 0, or the year 1 even, and the Bible student can find out exactly when he was born. So the person who determined that the year 0 separated the birth of Jesus from the ancient calendar called BC, or before Christ, was dramatically wrong. That person put us onto another calendar, and certain people on this earth know that. The Masons do not reckon time by the AD calendar. The Masons start their calendar at the year 4000 BC. Albert Mackey, the 33rd degree Mason and author of the greatest of all of the Masonic encyclopedias, told us about the Masonic calendar in his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Here's what he wrote. A period L period, the year of light. The date found by adding 4000 to the vulgar. I look up the word vulgar, it means the common or modern era. Thus, he wrote in his example cited in the encyclopedia, 1911, the year 1911 AD plus 4,000 years equals 5911. Therefore, the year 1994 AD is the year 5994 in the year AL. The A of AL stands for Anno, the L stands for Lucis. Anno Lucis. This means that the Masonic calendar ends in just about 5.5 years, 6 years. In other words, the Masonic calendar ends in the year 6000 AL. To show you that the Masons know that the AL calendar is their measuring method, let me show you this Distinguished Achievement Medal awarded to C. Fred Kleinneck, the current sovereign Grand Commander of all of Freemasonry, on May Day 5990 A period L period. You probably cannot read it, but under the date it says the Anno Lucis, and the date was given as 5990 AL, May Day, 1990. Let me show you the difference between the two calendar systems. The top shows the AD calendar, and this calendar starts at 4000 BC, and then at the year 0, it changes to the years known as AD. The Masonic calendar is shown on the bottom. Their calendar starts at the year 0 and then goes to the year 6000 AL, or the year 2000 AD. The year 1993 AD supposedly means 1993 years since the birth of Jesus. The year 5993 AL means 5,993 years since the arrival of Lucifer on the earth after being expelled from heaven. That's what the Masons mean by the term AL, Anno Lucis. So the Masons think this is the year 5993, or now 5994 AL, and they are looking for the year 6000. Something is going to happen on that year, and then there will be a coming 1,000-year period. Nowhere in any Masonic writing can I find any date past the year 7000 AL, so that means that they anticipate the world coming to an end at that time. So if you want to talk about the end of the world, the Masons claim it is going to end in the year 7000 AL, or 1,000 years after the year 6000 AL. The Masons do not tell us what happens after the year 7000 AL because it appears as if they do not know. But they know what will happen after the year 6000 AL. One of the writers of the Theosophist magazine in 1881 summed it up this way: the history of creation and of this world from its beginning up to the present time is composed of 7 chapters. The 7th chapter is not yet written. That means to me that the writer knew that the 7,000-year calendar of the Masonic Lodge was the real one. She was saying that the first 6,000 years, the first 6 chapters, have been written by the Luciferians, but the last chapter, starting on the 1st of January, 6000 AL, will be written by Lucifer himself and has not as yet been written. Perhaps the New Agers have said it the best. This is a book entitled The Aquarian Conspiracy, written by Marilyn Ferguson. Marilyn is one of the major New Age writers, and this is an important book on the subject. In it, she claims we are entering a millennium of love and light. A millennium is, of course, 1,000 years long, so I believe she is talking about what will happen at the end of the 6,000 years. There will be a period of 1,000 years that will follow, and she calls this period the New Age. Also remember that the light she refers to comes from Lucifer, the light bearer. So she is saying there will be a 1,000-year period of light coming from the light bearer Lucifer starting in the year 6000 AL. Someone else told us about the 1,000-year period, a publishing company called the Lucis Trust. The Lucis Trust was created in 1923, and it consisted of a trust and a publishing company. The trust has always, as I understand it, has always been called the Lucis Trust, but the publishing company used to be called the Lucifer Publishing Company. That name was changed sometime after it was originally created. The word Lucis is, of course, Latin for light. Excuse me. They published a quarterly newsletter, and in the 3rd quarter 1982 newsletter, they wrote this: the year 2000, meaning the year 2000 AD, looms before humanity as a gigantic milestone which marks both an ending and a beginning. Excuse me. It marks the end of a volatile millennium, which has seen enormous progress and change. But more importantly, the year 2000 stands as the symbolic portal through which humanity can pass into a new age if it so chooses. What they were saying was that the new age, also called the New World Order, will be in place by the year 2000, or in the year 2000. Notice that mankind does not have to pass through this portal. The author says that we have a choice. The writer wrote that we can pass through the portal if we choose to do so. We do not have to choose to do so. We do not have to pass through the portal. That means that we can change the future. We do not have to accept the New Age, the New World Order. We can choose not to pass through the portal into the 1,000-year period called the New World Order. So do not give up. We do have a chance. All we have to do is educate enough people, and we the people will not choose to pass through the portal. I can imagine that there are some of you who are getting very frightened as you are viewing this tape. Some of you are probably saying that there is no hope for our future. But here one of the supporters of the New World Order is saying that we do not have to accept the New World Order. All of us can refuse to go into it. So I'm saying to you now, it is not final. We have a chance. Do not give up. We do not have to live under the New World Order. Now let me return to our study of the pyramid as a symbol of a worship of the sun god. This is the pyramid of niches, I guess, in Mexico. It has 7 levels and 365 niches. It must have served as a giant calendar with a level for each day of the week and a niche for each of the 365 days. Maybe the priests of the sun god worship placed a rock or something inside each niche on the side of the pyramid so that they could keep track of the days of the calendar. But notice that the pyramid is flat. All the pyramids that we're going to study are connected to the sun god, are flat. Some have houses on top, but all are flat. I'll explain why that is a little later. This is the pyramid of El Castillo at Chichen Itza. It has 4 stairways and a total of 365 steps. So it was also dedicated to the sun god. Here is another flat pyramid, this one being on the top of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., and this is the home of the 33rd Degree Council. Notice that they call their building a temple, and a temple is where one can reasonably expect to worship a god. The Masons call their headquarters a temple because they worship the god Lucifer inside of it. This is the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States once again. I'd like to define the 2 Latin phrases around the top and the bottom of the seal and show you how they are related to the pyramid in the middle. The phrase annuit septis on the top means annuit, the announcement of, or the announcing of, and septis, conception, meaning the birth of. So annuit septis means that those who designed the Great Seal were announcing the birth of something, and they told us what that something was in the bottom part of the seal. They wrote the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum on the seal, and the first 2 words mean Novus, new, and Ordo, order. I've been told that the Catholic Church is now calling their Mass the Novus Ordo, meaning the new order, for some time now. They are translating the 2 Latin words to mean the new order. And the word seclorum means of the world or world. So we use the English word secular in our language, and this is the dictionary definition of that word. The word comes from the Latin word secularis and means of or pertaining to the worldly, as distinguished from the spiritual, specifically not under church control. So the American government was committed to bringing in the New World Order of Lucifer by those who designed the seal in 1782. Our founding fathers dedicated this nation to that task in 1776. The proof of that statement is in the Great Seal of the United States. A book entitled Magic Symbols adds another piece to the puzzle. It says the designer of the seal has permitted a slight error in the Latin, for in reality the last word of the Latin word should read seclorum or saculorum. But if this correct spelling had even been used, then the reverse side of the seal would not have contained 2 times 13 letters. The author is referring here to the 17 letters in the words Novus Ordo Seclorum and the 9 Roman numerals in the numbers at the base of the pyramid. So according to this author, the designers of the seal even misspelled a word so that it would come out in a multiple of 13. They had to make it come out so that the number of the letters in the phrase was a multiple of 13, a magic number to the Masons. The seal of the United States was approved in 1782 by basically the same men who wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. They knew what they were doing. So the phrase means the New World Order. So together the phrases mean that our founding fathers were announcing the birth of the New World Order. They were doing this in 1776 when they first started creating the government of the United States. Quite simply, our founding fathers knew what they were doing. And the reason they knew what they were doing was because they were conspirators. They were Luciferians. I know that many in America believe that our founding fathers believed in the God of the Bible and that they were writing a very godly document. That statement is true if, and understand if, you acknowledge that they believed that Lucifer was a god. We have been lied to. We've been lied to from the very beginning of our nation, and I'll say that again. Our founding fathers were Luciferians. They believed that Lucifer was a god. I know that is difficult to understand and accept, but I can prove it. This is why I made the video called America's Secret Destiny, a study of the betrayal of our founding fathers. That video will document the evidence that I am right. Now, to further illustrate my point about how this conspiracy has been concealing the truth from us for centuries, let me now discuss how America got its name. I believe that this information will startle you, but I believe it to be the truth. This is a book entitled The Illuminati 666, and its author tells us a very disturbing piece of information. This is what he says on page 38 of that book. The ancient Mayans, meaning the earliest Americans, of the Yucatan in Mexico worship the serpent god under the name of Kan. Kan means serpent in the Mayan language. As Kan or Akan was the American Sumerian, so as Kan or Akan was the ancient Sumerian and ancient Scottish word for serpent. Here we find the origin of our word canny, shrewd, or serpent-like. The Babylonians worshipped Kan or Can, the serpent, and Vol, the god of fire. The Romans simply combined the two words into Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, from whence also comes our word volcano. And this seems to be how the Mayans and Mexicans named their gods. They too combined two words to describe their serpent god. Hence, Kukul means beautiful bird, and Kan means serpent. Hence, Kukulkan means bird serpent in the Mayan language. This is the exact same meaning for Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican god in central Mexico. The cosmic symbol for Quetzalcoatl was a feathered serpent. This is a picture that appeared in our local newspaper in 1992 of a man doing an Aztec dance with a snake in his mouth. The caption reads in part, "The snake represented the ancient Aztec god Quetzalcoatl." Notice how each of these various religions, or cultures rather, had a religion that worshipped the serpent as a god. The Babylonians, the Mayans, the Sumerians, the Romans, and the Scottish people all had a worship of Lucifer. This is a slide showing Queen Mu of the Mayans as a child consulting a soothsayer. The queen is shown on the left side of the picture, and the soothsayer is in approximately the center of the picture, looking to the left side of the drawing. The winged serpent behind the soothsayer, according to the author, represents the protective genius of the Mayan Empire. This is a representation of Prince Cole of the Mayans in the heat of battle, overshadowed by the winged serpent representing the genius of the Mayan people. So we can see that serpent or sun worship is worldwide and timeless, so that it is really part of the South American culture before our ancestors arrived in America. Now, this next section of the lecture is going to be rather offensive, and I would like to apologize before I start. I'm sorry that I have to be the bearer of bad news, but I feel that I have to expose this Luciferian religion everywhere it presents itself. The next part of this lecture really gets scary. The Aztecs worshipped a god by the name of Quetzalcoatl. He was pictured as a good man who was a great benefactor of mankind. This is once again the book put out by the Sabar Shrine in the Masonic Shriners in Tucson. And this is a copy of page 10 of that book. It talks about the highlights of the year 1977. Notice on the right-hand side, that they celebrate May 15th of each year for the Order of Quetzalcoatl, a fiesta in honor of Imperial Sur. As far as I can tell, the book doesn't tell us who the Imperial Sur is, but that day of May the 15th appears to be a big holiday for the Masonic Shrine. It appears as if the Shriners are celebrating some day honoring Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god. We've been told that America was named after Amerigo Vespucci, the navigator of Christopher Columbus. I would now like to offer an alternative explanation and ask you to decide if you feel the traditional explanation, the one we've been taught, is the correct one. This is William Still's book entitled New World Order, and in it he makes these amazing statements. Even the name America may be the product of secret societies. In an 1895 edition of a magazine named Lucifer, published by the Occult Theosophical Society, author James Price gave an interesting insight into the meaning of the word America. He said that the supreme god of the Mayan culture of Central America, known as Quetzalcoatl elsewhere, was known as Amaru in Peru. Amaru's territory was known as Amaruku, or if you will, Amaruku. According to Mr. Price, from the latter comes our word America. America is literally translated land of the serpent. Mr. Price was not the only one to believe this. I read a book entitled Atlantis, Mother of Empires by Robert B. Stacy Judd. I am not here to comment on whether or not these authors' contentions that the Mayans were escapees from the legendary continent called Atlantis, but I will tell you that he builds an excellent case that Quetzalcoatl, the Toltec god, excuse me, was known as Kukulkan among the Mayans. He wrote, in Peru he was known as Amaru, but both of these names have an identical meaning, in other words, the feathered or plumed serpent. Incidentally, from the Peruvian word, the Peruvian name, comes Amaruku, or Amaruka, out of which many students believe the name America resulted. And one of the key Masons agrees. Manly P. Hall, in his book entitled America's Assignment, wrote that since the serpent is frequently a symbol of Lucifer, it is no exaggeration to extrapolate from this that America may well mean land of Lucifer. That completely fits our story so far, doesn't it? Completely. Our nation was committed to Lucifer by our founding fathers at the very beginning of our nation because they knew that America was the land of Lucifer. They knew what the name Amaraku meant. This is why they selected the Great Pyramid of Cheops as their symbol of this nation. This is why they chose to commit this nation to the New World Order, because they knew that this program was the program of Lucifer. That is why they placed the eye of Lucifer above the pyramid on the reverse side of the Great Seal of America. Simply stated, they knew. And the reason they knew is because our founding fathers were Luciferians. Here's another interesting observation. This is not very pleasant to the Catholics, but I try to tell the truth as I find it. The origin of the word Vatican is also derived from two words. The Latin word Vatic or Vatus means prophet or soothsayer. The combined word Vatican appears to mean divination by the serpent. I know that many of you, especially the Catholics in the viewing audience, think this is impossible, but what if it isn't? What if this conspiracy has hidden their worship of the serpent even in the name of the Vatican? I've established that this conspiracy conceals their hidden meanings from the public, and here we see the possible concealment of a serpent worship even inside the Catholic Church. Let me show you another strange connection between the Masons and the Catholic Church. This is the May 8th, 1991 edition of the Mount Washington Press, a paper near Cincinnati, Ohio. The article is about how the Catholic Archdiocese of Cincinnati, Ohio, sends all of their future priests to Joseph Wicker, the psychologist shown in the picture. Mr. Wicker is the worshipful master of Mount Washington Masonic Lodge number 642 in Mount Washington, Ohio. That means that he is the president of the Masonic Lodge in his hometown. The Catholic Church allows a Mason to determine which men are to become priests in the Catholic religion. Mr. Wicker said that he no longer considers himself a practicing Catholic, but practices what he calls Rosicrucian experiments. The Rosicrucians are an old fraternity, like the Masonic Lodge, that teaches all things are noble through the use of reason. They have been officially condemned by the Catholic Church. Mr. Wicker also reports that he has not yet practiced what he calls Rosicrucian time travel. He further stated that he believes in reincarnation. Ask yourself what type of priest he's going to recommend. Assume for a moment what he might think of a future Catholic priest who believes that the Masonic order is a concealed Luciferian conspiracy. Do you honestly believe that he will get a good recommendation from the good psychologist? I hardly think so. Yet this is the man who is going to decide if a man is suitable for priesthood in the Catholic Church in Cincinnati. The article does not say how the Catholic Church selected Mr. Wicker, but the article said that they did. It is time to offend the Catholics once again. This is a picture of a Catholic priest during a Mass raising up the disc wafer to the top of his arms. I remember that when I was a Catholic, bells would ring when the priest got the wafer to this position, and we would all thank God for this supposed symbol of Jesus Christ. But I now contend that the round wafer represents a symbol of the sun god in circle form, and as it rises in the morning, we worship it as a symbol of the rising sun god, Lucifer. Someone in the past added this ceremony into the Catholic Mass, and they were probably only a few who understood and objected. And those who put the sun symbol into the Mass probably raised a furor that someone would think such a thing about the Catholic Church, and those in opposition quietly stopped their protests. And it is still in the Mass today without anyone understanding what it really means. I'd like to make one last comment. The Bible says that Jesus broke bread at the Last Supper in front of all of his apostles. He was eating his last meal before he knew he would be crucified. And it is not reasonable to believe that he was eating paper-thin round wafers. He was eating bread in the form customary to the time, probably in the shape of a round or oblong loaf. He used the broken bread to symbolize his broken body at crucifixion. Many traditional fundamentalist churches use a loaf of bread, and it is broken as it is passed around by its members. But here is why some feel it is a symbol of something far more sinister. According to the book Illuminati 666, a round disc wafer was an Egyptian symbol of the sun. The thin disc-shaped wafer was a symbol of Lucifer, the sun god. The disc was an ancient symbol of Lucifer, and the Catholic Church uses the round disc wafer supposedly as a remembrance of the bread used at the Last Supper. They claim that their God is the God of the Bible, but there is nothing that I can find that claims that a disc had anything to do with Jesus or the God of the Bible. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the Luciferian author of The Secret Doctrine, confirms this on page 536 of her book. She writes, quote, "The idea of representing the hidden deity by the circumference of a circle is one of the oldest symbols. So it appears that only the loyal members of the Catholic Church do not know what it means. So the question remains, why has the Catholic Church adopted the use of pagan or Luciferic symbols in their worship? We have been told that the Church compromised their position centuries ago to get pagans into the Catholic Church. They were saying that their symbols led them to the same God that the pagans were worshiping, and therefore they were encouraging the pagans to join their church. But that is no longer the case. The Catholic Church today is not appealing to pagans to join it because they are pagans. So they could certainly eliminate all of these pagan symbols from their religion, but they have chosen not to do so. I'd like to continue now with my discussion of the secret societies, including the Masonic Lodge. One of the most recent secret societies to surface is the Italian Masonic group known as P2, P as in Petunia, and 2 the number. And that stands for Propaganda Masonica Due, or abbreviated by the media into P2. This is the article that appeared in our local newspaper that announced the discovery of the secret Masonic Lodge. The article said this about the Masonic group in Italy. It surfaced in 1981 when it toppled the government of Premier Arnaldo Forlani. By the way, Forlani was the gentleman shown in the picture in the article, and attempted to replace it with an authoritarian government. This article appeared 4 days later after the first and showed that captured membership lists showed 953 names, including over 100 Catholics assigned to the Vatican in Vatican City in service to the Pope. If you are a Catholic, you know that you cannot be both a Mason and a Catholic unless you are a member of the Masonic group known as P2, and then your membership is permissible. P2 is the successor to P1, created by Giuseppe Mazzini, the head of the Illuminati and a Mason. So this is a picture of Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian revolutionary and member of the Masons. Mr. Mazzini has an interesting past. We in America know very little about him, but he is an extremely important individual in the history of the world, because Mazzini also created the Mafia. The word Mafia is taken from the first initials of the Italian slogan, and I'll pronounce it as well as I can. Mazzini, meaning Giuseppe Mazzini, the founder of the Mafia, autorici forte inserde avolamente, and those Italian words translate into Mazzini authorizes theft, arson, and poisoning. In other words, Mafia members have the permission of its founder to engage in any activity that will enable them to further the work of their organization. Remember specifically that poisoning was authorized by Mazzini. What Mr. Mazzini was teaching his subordinates was that the ends justify the means. The classic morality without any morality of the Masons, the Illuminati, the Communists, and the New Age. What he was saying was that its members could use whatever assisted them in furthering the goals of the conspiracy. Mr. Mazzini was also a member of the Carabinieri, founded in 1815 to, quote, completely annihilate Christianity, unquote. Mazzini was also a member of the Illuminati. In fact, he was the European head of that group. Therefore, Mazzini's resume, if he submitted one to an employer, would read, I am or was a member of the Illuminati, the creator of the Mafia, the founder of the P1 Masonic group, a member of the Carabinieri, and a personal friend of Albert Pike, the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Masonic Lodge throughout the world. And to show you that the P2 group believed in morality, in amorality, without morality inside the Illuminati, they poisoned John Paul I, as shown here. John Paul I was the Pope just before the current Pope John Paul II. This is a book entitled In God's Name, written by David Yallop. In this book, the author builds a case that the P2 group of Masons was involved in the murder by poisoning of Pope John Paul I, who served only, notice this, only 33 days. Notice once again, as I said, the Pope was murdered while in office only a symbolic number of 33 days. Yallop details the evidence that any or all of 6 key suspects, 2 cardinals, 1 bishop, 2 bankers, and the head of the P2 itself had motives to kill the Pope. Yallop states that the P2 has interlocks with the Mafia. And if that is true, it is because both groups have the same founder, Giuseppe Mazzini. The Pope had discovered a fraudulent deal wherein the Church had bought $1 billion worth of, notice by the way, billion with the B, $billion worth of phony bonds from the bankers in the P2. The bankers were transferring $1 billion out of the Vatican. One of his first acts as Pope was to start working on plans to remove all of these Masons from the Church, and he died with those papers in his hands. Yallop writes, the circumstances of his death and the discovery of his body make it abundantly clear that the Vatican perpetrated a cover-up. There was no autopsy on Pope John Paul I, and the Pope's body was immediately embalmed, and the papers have disappeared. By the way, Yallop wrote in 1985 that his successor, Pope John Paul II, had not made any of the changes about the P2 group that his predecessor was going to make. That means that as of 1985, the Masons were still inside the Vatican. But there was no conspiracy. According to this article, a Vatican cardinal named Silvio Audi reported that the Pope was in poor health and that he was, quote, struck down by the weight of his job, unquote. He went on to report that he defended the Vatican's decision not to provide an autopsy on his body. He said that everyone would say that we were, quote, doing the autopsy because there was something suspicious, unquote. I always thought that was the reason that you did autopsies, because you felt that there was something suspicious in the death of the deceased person. But we see here that that is the reason not to do an autopsy. Each of you will have to decide for yourself whether or not the Pope was murdered. Next, I'd like to talk about someone else who appears to have been murdered by the P2 Masonic Lodge. Perhaps as you remember, Grace Kelly died on September the 14th, 1982, when her car went out of control and plunged off a cliff. As you remember, Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier of Monaco, a nearby neighbor of Italy, and the place where the P2 frequently met. There are charges being made in Europe today that Princess Grace, a Roman Catholic, was murdered by the P2 Masonic group because she had discovered the fraudulent $1 billion deal in the secret P2 organization. The theory is that as a woman known worldwide as a Catholic, Grace could have blown the story wide open if she had gone public with it. They must have really feared Grace Kelly because she could have exposed the P2 group inside the Catholic Church. The theory holds that the brakes on her car had been tampered with, and that is why her car went off the road over the cliff. It is known that immediately after the crash that killed her, her car, shown here, was covered with a tarp by the police from Monaco, removed, and then immediately crushed into a block of scrap metal. The evidence has disappeared, so no one knows for sure. Her car crashed in France and was removed by the police from Monaco without France's permission and before it could be examined by the French police. It sounds to me like someone knew she was going to drive the car without brakes and that the evidence was destroyed quickly before someone found out that the car had been tampered with. One of the indications that she might have been murdered is the fact that Grace's brother, Jack, shown on the left, and her brother-in-law died on Philadelphia streets within blocks of each other, within hours of each other, on the same day, March the 2nd, 1985, of so-called heart attacks. Both were carrying on their own investigation into Grace's strange death. It sounds like murder to me. There's also some evidence that the P2 might have been busy in America also murdering people who might have been in a position to break the story of the $1 billion scandal. This is a transcript of a TV program called Close Up that aired on February the 14th, 1983 on the public broadcasting system. This program was hosted by Jessica Savage, the author of the TV program. About 8 months later, Ms. Savage and Martin Fishbein, her boyfriend, died in a rather mysterious car accident. This article said that the boyfriend drove his station wagon north in the parking lot of the restaurant they were leaving, past two signs which said no cars were allowed, and continued for about 40 or 50 feet where it fell into a ditch filled with water. The article did not say whether police investigated whether or not the gas pedal had been jammed so that Mr. Fishbein could not control the car. But sounds like that was what happened, and the reason it might have happened is because Jessica Savage had not finished her investigation into the P2 scandal. But we'll never know. Those who are critical of those of us trying to expose the P2 scandal often claim that the P2 Lodge is not a Masonic Lodge. But the truth of the matter is that they were a recognized part of the regular Grand Orient Lodge of Italy, itself recognized by the Grand Lodge of England in 1972. It has been a Masonic Lodge for nearly a century. It is my contention, after nearly 30 years of research into this Luciferian conspiracy, that it has infiltrated into every fabric of our society, including our religions. Now, please notice that I am not saying that the Catholics are conspirators. I am saying that this conspiracy has infiltrated the Catholic religion and has placed its symbols all around us. And we simply do not understand that they are symbols of something far more sinister. And even if we did, we probably wouldn't believe that they were connected to a 6,000-year-old worldwide worship of Lucifer. Mr. Price, the author we quoted a few minutes ago, was not the only one to believe that America has a hidden secret in its founding. So it all seems to fit. America was named after Lucifer. America has a secret destiny. America's secret destiny is the New World Order. America's role in the future is to bring the New World Order to the world. The New World Order is coming very soon. On January the 1st, the New World Order will begin the year 2000 AD, and it will last for 1,000 years. I'd like to now change the subject just a little and discuss the connection of Freemasonry with the Mormon Church. This is Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon religion. He started the Mormon Church in 1830. 12 years later, in 1842, Mr. Smith wrote, "On March the 16th, 1842, I was with the Masonic Lodge and rose to the Sublime Degree. I believe that the Sublime Degree is the Master Mason degree, meaning that he became a third-degree Mason. After Joseph Smith joined the Masonic Lodge, Masonry swept through the Mormon religion. There were 5 lodges inside the Mormon religion near their home city of Nauvoo, and the one at Montrose, Illinois was called Rising Sun Number 12. It appears that some of the Mormons understood. It is an interesting study as to why Joseph Smith joined the Mormons. In 1839, 3 years before he did join the Masons rather. I got back, the question is, why did he join the Masons? So 3 years before he joined the Masons, he wrote a letter to his believers in which he said, "We further caution our brethren against the organization of bands of companies by oaths, penalties, or secrecies." So it sounds like he was speaking out against the Masons before he joined them. That is very strange, but any researcher knows that before he joined them, he spoke out against secret organizations. It is claimed by the Mormons that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon in 1830, 12 years before he joined the Masons. There are at least 3 warnings in the Book of Mormon, the basic Bible of the Mormon Church, against secret combinations. The first is in 3 Nephi 9:9. The great city of, and I'll pronounce this the best I can, Jacobugath, have I caused to be burned with fire because of their secret murders and combinations. As I've shown you repeatedly, the Masons are a secret combination, and on occasion they have murdered people. Here Joseph Smith's Book of Mormon warns the Mormons against the Masons, but he still joined them. The second warning is in Ether 8:18. Forgive me, Mormons, I don't know how to pronounce that. "And it came to pass that they formed a secret combination, which combination is most abominable and wicked above all in the sight of God. Yet Joseph Smith joined the Masons." And the third warning is in Ether 9:6. "For so great had been the spreading of this wicked and secret society that it had corrupted the hearts of all the people." It sounds as if the Book of Mormon is specifically warning the Mormons about the Masonic Lodge. Yet 3 years later, Mr. Smith joined the Masons with their oaths, penalties, and secrecies. And then, less than 2 months after he joined the Masons, on May the 8th, 1842, Joseph Smith introduced the Mormon Temple Endowment Ceremony. Let me explain a little about this endowment ceremony. There are 2 classes of Mormons in their church, the regular Mormon and the endowed Mormon. I have read where only about 20% of the Mormons are endowed Mormons. This means, of course, that 80% of the Mormons have never been through their so-called sacred ceremony. There are 2 classes of Masons in the Lodge, the regular Mason and the 33rd degree illuminated Mason. Endowed Mormons do not ask to go through the endowment ceremony. They must be recommended for the secret ceremony, so he or she cannot ask to be an endowed Mormon. The 32nd degree Mason is recommended for the 33rd degree initiation ceremony. He cannot go through the 33rd without being asked. So only certain Mormons can become endowed, and only certain Masons can become illuminated 33rd degree Masons. let me put these events in their proper sequence so that the viewer can understand which came first. The Mormon story really starts in 1826. This is a map of the area around Palmyra, Batavia, and Manchester, the location where all of these events unfolded. They're all, of course, near the city of Rochester, within 25 miles, and Rochester is in the eastern part of New York State. In 1825, there seems to be some difference as to when Hiram Smith, Joseph Smith's brother, joined the Masons in Palmyra, New York. But the consensus is that he joined in 1825. In 1826, Captain William Morgan published the entire Masonic ritual for at least the first 8 degrees. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, lived about 50 miles from the place where this activity took place in New York City. In 1830, Joseph Smith founds the Mormon religion. In 1842, Joseph Smith joined the Masonic Lodge, as we've already seen. Later, in 1842, Joseph Smith released the Temple Endowment Ceremony. It is important at this point to make certain that you understand that the Mormons claim that Joseph Smith received the endowment ceremony as a revelation from God. Joseph Smith claimed that the ceremony was given to him by the God of the Bible. You might wish to buy this book entitled Mormonism's Temple of Doom, written by Bill Schneblin, a writer I've discussed before. You might recall that Mr. Schneblin happens to be an ex-Mormon, an ex-Mason, and an ex-male witch. He shows the 3 ceremonies of these 3 organizations side by side, and you will see the similarities. All 3 use the same signs, symbols, and ceremonies. And in a chapter entitled The Temple and Ceremony and Masonry, inside this book entitled Mormonism, Shadow or Reality, written by 2 ex-Mormons, Gerald and Sandra Tanner, you can see the Mormon and Masonic ceremonies side by side. They list at least 27 specific similarities between the 2. In other words, all of the evidence is that Joseph Smith wrote the endowment ceremony from the Masonic ritual. There were at least 2 ways he could have found the Masonic ritual. Number 1, he could have read Captain Morgan's book entitled Freemasonry Exposed, because it was published 18 years before he wrote the endowment ceremony. He was at least 21 when the Morgan affair hit the newspapers of the area. The Morgan book was a word-for-word compilation of the rituals for the first 3 Masonic degrees. So Mr. Smith could have learned about the rituals from this book. It is important to remind you that his brother had already joined the Masons prior to the release of Captain Morgan's books, so his own brother was involved in the knowledge of the Morgan murder. Or secondly, he could have taken the endowment ceremony from his own exposure to the Masonic ritual as a 3rd-degree Mason only 2 months before he wrote the endowment ceremony. As I said, you can know that the 2 ceremonies are amazingly similar. So it is possible that Joseph Smith could have obtained the endowment ceremony from the Masons as early as 1826, some 18 years before he released it as a Mormon. In any event, on June the 27th, 1844, Joseph Smith was murdered by the Masons. By the way, notice that Joseph Smith was murdered on the 27th day of June, the 6th month of the year. By coincidence, if you add the 27 and the 6 together, you get another concealed Masonic 33. The Mormon Church tells the curious that an unruly mob shot Joseph Smith, but all of the evidence is that he was shot by the Masons themselves because he had revealed their initiation ceremony inside the Temple Endowment Ceremony. I would like to provide you with another concealed indication that the Masons might have been involved in the shooting of Joseph Smith. Witnesses to a shooting at the jail in Carthage, shown here, Carthage, Missouri, said that as he was leaving the jail and while others were firing at him, he raised his arms in what the Masons call the Grand Hailing Sign. Now this is a picture of the sign as found in a Masonic ritual book. If you raise your arms to a 90-degree angle like this and say out loud, "O Lord my God, is there no mercy for the widow's son?" The man who is attempting to murder you, if he is a Mason, upon hearing you say this, will not shoot you." That means that Joseph Smith knew that the men who were shooting at him and ultimately murdered him were members of the Masons. Joseph Smith was attempting to notify his fellow Masons that he was one of them and that they had taken an oath not to shoot one of their fellow Masons. But the Masons outside the jail shot him anyway. The only reason one Mason will shoot another is if he violates the oath that all Masons take. And the Mormons know that their prophet was giving the Masonic sign. Their book entitled History of the Church, in Volume 5, page 618, says this: "Joseph Smith fell outward into the hands of his murderers, exclaiming, 'O Lord my God.'" Additional details of Mr. Smith's death were given out in another Mormon book entitled Times and Seasons in Volume 5, page 585. That book says, "With uplifted hands," I want to go back, I pushed the button a little bit prematurely. "And with uplifted hands, they," apparently both Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram Smith, who was also murdered, gave the same sign. "With uplifted hands, they gave such signs of distress as would have commanded the interposition and benevolence of savages or pagans." He went on to say they were both Masons in good standing. And Cecil McGavin, the Mormon author of a book entitled Mormonism and Masonry, wrote this on page 17. Joseph Smith, who knew that death was near, started to repeat the distress signal of the Masons, expecting thereby to gain the protection its members are pledged to give a brother in distress. That oath which Joseph Smith took when he became a Mason is this: "I will never reveal any part or parts of the secret arts and mysteries of ancient Freemasonry. Those who take the Masonic oath acknowledge that they will be murdered should they break the oath." The oath continues. "Binding myself under no less penalty than to have my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by the roots." Obviously, a man shot to death because he has violated his oath is not the same as having his throat cut. But it is known that the Masons chose to kill Joseph Smith by shooting him because he had released their secrets. The Mormon takes a similar oath during the endowment ceremony. The Mormon takes this oath: "I will never reveal the secrets of the endowment ceremony. Rather than do so, I would suffer my life to be taken." So the Mormon takes an oath, just like the Mason, that his life will be taken if he reveals the secrets of their rituals. Now this is a picture of the sign being given by a Mormon dressed for his role in the Mormon endowment ceremony. Notice the Masonic-like apron worn by the Mormon. At least one Mason provided a clue that Joseph Smith had broken his oath. A man named J.M. Orr of Utah, a Masonic Grand Master, meaning that he was the president of a lodge in Utah, made this statement in 1878. "We say to the priests of the Latter-day Saints," and the Latter-day Saints, of course, are the Mormons, "you cannot enter our lodge rooms. You have heretofore sacrificed the sacred obligations of our beloved order. Stand aside, we want none of you. Such a wound as you gave Masonry is not easily healed, and no Latter-day Saint is or can become a member of our order in this jurisdiction." I'm sorry, I didn't get that slide to come up. Let's read it again. "Such a wound as you gave Masonry is not easily healed, and no Latter-day Saint is or can become a member of our order in this jurisdiction." And certain early Mormons knew that Joseph Smith was killed by the Masons. Mormon elder Heber C. Kimball, a close personal friend of Joseph Smith's, was also a Mason. He wrote this: "Joseph and Hiram Smith were master Masons, yet they were massacred through the instrumentality of that fraternity." And at least one current Mormon agrees that there is a connection between the Mormons and the Masons. Dr. Reed Durham, director of the Mormon Institute of Religion at the University of Utah and president of the Mormon History Association, wrote this: "The many parallels found between early Mormonism and the Masonry of that day are substantial. There is absolutely no question in my mind that the Mormon ceremony, which came to be known as the endowment, had an immediate inspiration from Masonry." Don't forget that Joseph Smith himself said that the Mormon endowment ceremony was given to him by the God of the Bible. But Dr. Durham admits that the Masonic initiation ceremony was the immediate inspiration of the Mormon endowment ceremony. But the official position of the Mormons was stated by Elder Heber C. Kimball, who had been a Mason since 1823, 7 years prior to the founding of the Mormon religion. He wrote, Masonry had been taken from the priesthood. If Elder Kimball meant that the Masonic ritual had been taken from the Mormon endowment ceremony, he is dramatically wrong. Excuse me. Remember that the Masonic ritual was first made public in America in a nationwide scandal in 1826, some 16 years before the endowment ceremony was written down. So it is very clear that Mormonism took the endowment ceremony from the Masonic Lodge. But the Mormons claim that Joseph Smith received the ceremony from a direct revelation of God. Bruce R. McConkie, one of the first council of the 70, says the ordinances performed in the temple were given in modern times to prophet Joseph Smith by revelation. And Joseph Smith died because he had stolen the secret initiation ceremony of the Masons, and therefore had violated the oath he had taken as a Mason. Now this is another source of knowledge about the shooting of Joseph Smith. This is a report by Mervyn B. Hogan of the University of Utah entitled Freemasonry and the Lynching at Carthage Jail. Joseph Smith was not hanged, he was shot. So it is assumed that the good professor is talking about the shooting of Joseph Smith. In this book, Mr. Hogan states that the evidence proves that Joseph Smith was shot by the Masons. He claims that the Mormons, in anger because of the death of Joseph Smith, wrote this oath, which has been called the Oath of Vengeance, into the endowment ceremony. It reads as follows. You and each of you do covenant and promise that you will pray and never cease to pray Almighty God to avenge the blood of the prophets under this nation, and that you will teach the same to your children unto the third and fourth generations. That means that those who took this oath inside the endowment ceremony pledged to avenge the death of Hiram and Joseph Smith against the government of the United States when they knew it was the Masons who killed their leaders. This oath was removed sometime around 1927, so for some 73 years, all endowed Mormons took an oath against innocent people. It is believed that Ezra Taft Benson, the current prophet of the Mormon Church, took this oath prior to its removal in 1927. Those who study the Mormon Church claim that he has never publicly repudiated the oath. But there are other connections between Mormonism and Masonry, and some of these can be found at the Mormon Temple in Salt Lake City. This is a book that I found in the Mormon bookstore here in Tucson. It is called Celestial Symbols and was written by Alan H. Harmer, apparently a member of the Mormon Church. It talks about the main temple of the Mormons at Salt Lake City. Construction on this temple was started in 1853 and completed in 1893. It is important to mention that Brigham Young, the prophet who succeeded Joseph Smith after he was murdered, claimed that he got the design of the temple from a revelation of God. This is the entire temple, showing one side and the front. I want you to notice that the temple has six obelisks in total, 3 in front and 3 in back. Now this is a photograph that I took when I visited the temple in 1993. And this is a picture of one of the sides of the temple. I'm sorry it's a little bit dark, but if you'll notice the use of the round circles, both in the windows and on the top of the columns, just to the left of each window, around 10 o'clock to each window. They are everywhere on the sides of the temple. This is a closer look at the use of the circular windows and the sun symbols on each side of the round windows. So find the round window and look to the left about 9 or 10 o'clock, and you'll see a sun symbol radiating from the circle there. And this is a close-up of those sun symbols with the rays emerging from the circle. So they've got sun symbols on the side of the church. This is a close-up of the sun symbols from the front of the temple. There you can see them a little more clearly. And this is a close-up of a star with one point down, also all over the sides of the temple. If you look very carefully in that little piece right up in the middle, there's a star there in concrete with one point down. You might remember that the Masons claim that when the star is shown with one point down, it represents the evil god, the goat of Mendes, or Baphomet. And these stars with one point down are all over the Mormon temple. It is important to notice that the so-called Christian church, the Christian temple, here's a better close-up of it, I'm sorry, it's another picture of the star with one point down. It is important to notice that the so-called Christian temple of the Mormons has no crosses on it. It has suns and stars with one point down, but no crosses. It also has a Big Dipper on the front of the temple. There you can see it, with the handle off to the left and the Big Dipper up around 12 o'clock. This is a rather dark slide that I made myself on my visit to the temple. One might ask the Mormons what the Big Dipper has to do with the Bible. This is a slide taken of the tops of the obelisk in front of the temple. Notice that there are no crosses on any of the obelisks. And this is the close-up of the top of the center obelisk. I didn't take this picture. It was in Mr. Harmer's book. And this is the statue of the angel Moroni on the top of the temple. The Mormons believe that the angel Moroni appeared to Joseph Smith and told him about the gold plates from which the Book of Mormon was allegedly translated. So he is more important to the Mormon church than is Jesus Christ. Mr. Harmer, the author of the book, attempted to explain why there are no crosses on the temple. He said the Mormons have resisted the use of the cross as a symbol on their churches because it has become commercialized. He failed to point out that the star with one point down has been commercialized by the Eastern Star Order of the Masonic Lodge and by the Satanic Church of Anton LaVey. And this is a catalog from a company that sells Masonic paraphernalia, the McCoy Company, the September 1991 edition. This is a page from that catalog that shows that the company is commercializing their upside-down star and the square and the compass that both the Masons and the Mormons use in their religion. But as far as I know, the Mormons are not eliminating their use of these symbols. The Mormons have made two more of the Masonic symbols a part of their endowment ceremony. This is called a book. This is a book, rather, entitled "What's Going On in There?" and it contains an actual transcript of the entire Mormon endowment ceremony. This book was written by Chuck Sackett, a former Mormon and a former endowment ceremony worker, meaning that he was one of the Mormons who was involved in the actual endowment ceremony. In this book, Mr. Sackett describes what the Mormons call the garment of the holy priesthood. Each endowed Mormon must wear this garment 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, until he or she is buried in it. Before I quote from Mr. Sackett's book, I would like to show you this slide again. These are, as you'll remember, the square and the compass, the two major symbols of the Masonic order. Mr. Sackett continues, or reports rather, closer examination of the garment reveals a pair of buttonholes over the right breast sewn in the form of a square, meaning the square of the square and the compass of the Masons. Over the left breast, a pair of buttonholes in the form of a compass have been sewn in. So the endowed Mormon wears a garment with the two major symbols of the Masonic order sewn in it, and we have been told that there is no connection between Masonry and Mormonism. Yes, the Masons are everywhere, in every religion, in every culture, in every time period. The Mormons use sun symbols on their older temples as well. This is a sunstone taken from a Mormon temple in Nauvoo, Illinois. It is currently at the Smithsonian Institute, where it has been authenticated as coming from the Mormon temple. And I personally saw a full-size duplicate to this one in the Mormon Museum in Salt Lake City, Utah. Notice that it has a circle with the face on it, with rays emanating from its center. It is obviously a representation of the sun. Secondly, notice that there is a base and 3 layers, and the sun is laying on the top of the 3rd layer. It could be interpreted as meaning that one gets to the sun god through 3 degrees or 3 layers of the Masonic order. But that is speculation, and no one that I know has said that. There's one last thing I must talk about before I end this section on the Mormon Church, and it concerns part of the endowment ceremony. Once again, as I said, this scene I'm about to discuss is recorded from the exact words as recorded in Chuck Sackett's book, taken from a movie that all of the Mormons about to be endowed are viewing. Adam, the first man in the Bible, in the Garden of Eden, prays to the God of the Bible. He says, or he prays actually, "O God, hear the words of my mouth." He's praying to the God of the Bible. And Lucifer, portrayed by an actor, responds, "I hear you." Adam responds, "Who are you?" And Lucifer says, "I am the God of this world." And then asks Adam, "What do you want?" And Adam responds, "I am looking for messengers." Lucifer says messengers, meaning someone to witness to him, to tell him the truth about Christianity. And Lucifer says, "Oh, you want someone to preach to you. You want religion, do you? I will have preachers here presently." And then Lucifer provides Adam with a preacher. That means that Lucifer answers the prayer of Adam. Adam's prayer is to God, but Lucifer answers it. And this is in the endowment ceremony of the Mormon Church. And there is one more thing that is extremely disturbing in the endowment ceremony relating to Lucifer. One of the scenes in the endowment ceremony is a scene with Lucifer, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. A man portraying Lucifer shows up wearing an apron around his middle. And Adam asked the devil, "What is that apron you have on?" And Lucifer answers, "It is an emblem of my power and priesthoods, plural." It is to be remembered that the Mormon going through the endowment ceremony is in the temple to become a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And Lucifer says that the apron is a symbol of his priesthoods. And then Lucifer says to the character portraying Adam and Eve, the characters portraying Adam and Eve, who have just heard the God of the Bible come to the scene, Lucifer says, "See, you are naked. Take some fig leaves and make you aprons. Quick, hide." And then the narrator in the play says to all the Mormons assembled in the room who are going through the endowment ceremony, "Brethren and sisters, put on your aprons." And the movie stops while all the Mormons remove a bright green satin fig leaf embroidered apron from their packages of temple clothing given to them at the beginning of the endowment ceremony. And each of these endowed ceremony Mormons ties the apron around their waist. Notice how strange it is that the Mormons put on their aprons right after Lucifer asked them to hide, and right after the narrator stops the program and asks all of them to do so. Notice that Lucifer has just identified the apron as a symbol of his priesthoods, and yet the Mormons put on an apron as a symbol of their acceptance of a priesthood. And I am certain that the Mormons would certify that their apron is not Luciferian. But notice that it is Lucifer that orders them to put it on. Notice that it is both the Masons and the Mormons who wear aprons in their religious ceremonies. This is a picture of some Mormons wearing their aprons in their endowment ceremony. You'll see them on the three of the members and the people in front of you. I believe the man with the glasses is Chuck Sackett, the man who wrote the endowment ceremony for this book. So I think it is fair to conclude that the Mormons and the Masons are connected. Now let me attempt to tie all of this together. These are the last two sections of this lecture. I'd like to start the final area of discussion with a little background information on former President Ronald Reagan. There's a very puzzling event involving this president. He joined the Masons in February 1988 while he was President of the United States. This is a picture of him accepting a certificate of membership in the Masonic Lodge being presented by 3 worldwide leaders of the Masonic movement. This picture was on the cover of the April 1988 New Age magazine a Masonic magazine called The New Age. This is a copy of President Reagan's acceptance letter, also published in the April 1988 New Age magazine. President Reagan used taxpayers' money to have this letter typed. This act of joining the Masons was a very mysterious action on his part. Why would President Reagan, who claims to be a Christian, join this anti-Christian order? Christian churches, including the Catholic Church, have condemned Freemasonry for over 200 years. No Christian should belong, especially a Christian president. Reagan could have known something about the opposition of certain Christian churches if he had read a few recent newspapers. In 1987, just 6 months before Reagan joined the Masons, this article was published in our local newspaper. It says that an Anglican panel says Freemasonry may be incompatible with the Church. The Anglican panel was a part of the Church of England that had been commissioned with the task of studying the Masonic Lodge. 1 month later, this article appeared in a local newspaper. It says Freemason rituals, blasphemous, Church of England Synod says. The Church of England had joined several other Christian churches in discovering some real problems with the Masonic Lodge. The Church of England was finding great fault with the Masonic order, saying that Christians shouldn't belong. Yet Reagan, supposedly a Christian, joined the Masons. Apparently he doesn't read the newspapers. But Ronald Reagan could have read a little history about the opposition to the Masonic order by the Catholic Church. This is what they said about the Masonic order. Pope Leo XIII, the Catholic Pope from 1878 to 1903, wrote Humanus Genus in 1902. He said this about the Masonic order: their ultimate purpose, namely the overthrow of that whole religious and political order of the world which the Christian teaching has produced, and the substitution of a new state of things in accordance with their ideas, of which the foundations and laws shall be drawn from mere naturalism. I looked up the word naturalism in my dictionary, and it is defined as the fundamental doctrine of the naturalists is that human nature and human reason ought in all things to be the mistress and guide. So here we see that Pope Leo declared that the Masons were out to create a state government based upon reason. As I have shown in the past on this lecture, this has been the goal of the conspiracy for centuries. It certainly seems that the Pope has figured it out. It is interesting to note what happened to this particular Pope. Time magazine on June the 18th, 1984 wrote this: there were whispers about how poison killed Pope Leo XIII in 1903. So maybe the Pope had figured it out, and he was assassinated because he was telling the truth about the Masonic order. But Ronald Reagan apparently knew nothing about this papal bull, and therefore ignored it. Reagan still joined the Masons, even with all of this opposition, and he claims to be a Christian. One can only presume that he does not read the newspapers, nor does he know anything about the Catholic Church. He could have listened to other presidents who have spoken out about the Masonic order. This is one. This is a slide of John Quincy Adams, the 6th President of the United States, and he was one such president who spoke out about Masonry. He wrote this in 1833 about the Masonic Lodge: I do conscientiously and sincerely believe that the order of Freemasonry, if not the greatest, is one of the greatest morals and political evils under which the Union is now laboring. He continued, Masonry is a conspiracy of the few against the equal rights of the many, anti-republican in its sap. And the word sap, of course, means vitality. He was saying that Freemasonry was opposed to the Republican form of government, meaning that they opposed limited constitutional government. John Quincy Adams continued, I am prepared to complete the demonstration before God and man that the Masonic oath, obligations, and penalties cannot by any possibility be reconciled to the laws of morality, of Christianity, or of the land. So Ronald Reagan did not listen to the Catholic Church, the Church of England, nor John Quincy Adams, and he joined the Masons. In August of 1988, Ronald Reagan delivered the keynote address to the Republican Convention and to the nation. This is what he said in part. With George Bush, I'll know as we approach the new millennium. I think it is a fair question you ask Mr. Reagan what new millennium he's talking about. Is he talking about the next decade? No. That's a period of 10 years. Is he talking about the 21st century? No. That's a period of 100 years. So we can see, I believe, that Mr. Reagan was not talking, when he talked about the millennium, about 10 years or 100 years in the future. He was talking about a millennium, a 1,000-year period. Later on he said this in his speech: with George Bush, we'll have a nation confidently willing to take its leadership into the uncharted reaches of a new age. What is this new age that Mr. Reagan was talking about? Was he talking about the New World Order? And later he ended that speech with this thought: that's a new day, our sunlit new day. Why did he refer to the new day as being sunlit, especially about 6 months after he joined the Masonic Lodge? Apparently Mr. Reagan knows something that we don't know. There was one other puzzling thing that occurred around Ronald Reagan. The Washington Monument played a puzzling role in a particular event of the recent past. In January of 1981, President Reagan was sworn in as the President of the United States. In their coverage of that event, Time magazine wrote this: swearing in a president on the Capitol's west front for the first time ever. The President of the United States has traditionally been sworn in on the steps of the east side of the Capitol building, and no president had ever been sworn in on the west front before. But maybe this was done for aesthetic reasons. Maybe it would look better to the television audience if he was sworn in on the other side of the Capitol. Time magazine answered that question with this thought: the seldom used west front is crumbling, its rickety porticos held up by wooden posts. It is in need of structural repair. Rather than pop for a major repair job, however, the inaugural committee ordered a hasty coat of white paint and draped a gigantic American flag over the unsightly wooden beams. So the move of the site of the inauguration from one side of the Capitol building to the other was not done for the sake of picking a prettier location. So we must ask if this had another hidden meaning. And Time magazine published this picture of Reagan being inaugurated. You'll notice that the Washington Monument is at the top of the picture, and Ronald Reagan is at the bottom of the picture, shown by the green arrow. Now, this is what Time magazine said under the picture shown in the yellow that I put there with my underliner. Time magazine said, before some 150,000 listeners at the west front of the Capitol, that's how many people were there apparently on the west side, Reagan gazes towards the Washington Monument and delivers his address. First of all, how did the photographer know which way Reagan was gazing when his back was facing the photographer? Please don't ask, because Time's photographer would have no answer. Secondly, no other president had ever gazed at the Washington Monument, a symbol of the very presence of the sun god himself in the history of the United States. Why did Ronald Reagan? President Reagan repeated the ceremony on the west front of the Capitol when he was inaugurated for his second term in 1985. President George Bush was also sworn in on the west side in 1989. And President Bill Clinton was sworn in on this side as well in 1993. So the site was chosen for a particular reason, one that I still have not found an explanation for. My guess is that the sun rises in the east, and if you were inaugurated on the east side of the Capitol, you would face a rising sun. If you face the west, you would face a setting sun. If the rising sun is a sign of a beginning, the setting sun is a sign of a completion. I think it has something to do with an acknowledgement that Presidents Reagan, Bush, and Clinton have acknowledged that the New World Order has been started and that it is no longer a wish. They have acknowledged that it is in place and will be accomplished very soon. This is an almost identical photograph that appeared in the U.S. News and World Report coverage of the inauguration, showing Bill Clinton being inaugurated on the west front of the Capitol building and in front of the Washington Monument. That's Bill Clinton down in the center, a little bit off to the right, and the red carpet, and up above him, a little bit off to the left, is the Washington Monument. There is no caption saying that Clinton gazed at the Washington Monument while he gave a speech, but he certainly could have. Now going back to the 1988 Republican Convention, I would like to briefly examine the Thursday night coverage when George Bush accepted his nomination as Republican candidate for the presidency. He spoke to the American people on a night when a high percentage of the American people were watching the live coverage. George Bush talked about a brilliant diversity spread like stars, like 1,000 points of light in a broad and peaceful sky. He was allegedly talking about 1,000 volunteer organizations, but he did not tell us why he limited the number to just 1,000. There are probably hundreds of thousands of such organizations in America, and secondly, there are billions of stars in the universe, not 1,000. Is it possible that he was talking about 1,000 points, meaning years of light, from the light bearer? Is it possible he was talking about a 1,000-year millennium of the light bearer Lucifer? I believe he is, but you'll have to decide for yourself. Those who don't believe me tell me that George Bush created an organization called the 1,000 Points of Light Foundation, where he praised a different volunteer periodically during his presidency. This is a newspaper article that discussed the fact that he had acknowledged the work of 1,020 volunteer organizations by December the 6th, 1992. But it is my opinion that he did not use the phrase to mean 1,000 volunteer organizations. It's about the light bearer Lucifer and his 1,000-year New World Order starting in the year 2000 A.D. But to show you that I am right, that George Bush connected his points of light to Luciferianism, let me show you that the phrase was used as early as 1957, about 22 years before he did, by Alice Bailey. This is once again her book entitled The Externalization of the Hierarchy. As I've been showing you throughout this lecture, Alice Bailey was a believer in Lucifer as the head of the hierarchy that she says control world events. On page 353 of her book, she tells her readers that you will be able to present a tiny focal point through which the spiritual forces can work. The agency of the many tiny points of light and will, much potency can be transmitted. So the phrase was not original when George Bush used it in 1989. Alice Bailey, a Luciferian, used it in 1957. But the phrase is even more significant. Benjamin Creme, the Luciferian we have quoted often in this lecture as well, referred to the Great Invocation, a prayer-like poem that Lord Maitreya gave to mankind in 1945, about 44 years before George Bush, the phrase that contained this as its first line. This is the invocation from Lord Maitreya. From the point of light within the mind of God, notice the L is capitalized, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. If you'll remember, these conspirators believe that Lucifer is God and that light spelled with a capital L means the truth, that he is the God of the world. If you remember that, then George Bush's use of the phrase, 1,000 points of light, makes sense. I believe that George Bush knows. Here's another clue that I'm right. This is a picture of the 1989 Christmas tree in the nation's capital. The article said this: this tree is dedicated with 1,000 stars to signify his 1,000 points of light. So here we see 1,000 little lights being the 1,000 stars. And here's another puzzling incident I'd like to relate to you now. George Bush was inaugurated on January the 20th, 1989, on a Masonic Bible used during the inauguration of George Washington, a member of the Masons, just a little over 200 years before. As far as we can tell, George Bush is or was not a Mason, so it wouldn't seem to be appropriate for him to be inaugurated on a Masonic Bible, but he was. And this is another puzzling incident. This is George Bush throwing out the first baseball in Yankee Stadium in April of 1991. Mr. Bush is left-handed, and he wore a light windbreaker during the ceremony. Notice the number shown on his right arm. It is the number 33, the number of the degrees in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Why did he just happen to have that number on his windbreaker? Why did he just happen to have the Masonic number on his right arm? He could have had any number of the 99 that are less than triple digit. I do not know what it means, but it is just a thought-provoking incident. And to give you just a little clue that Bush might be a member of the Masons, I once had a phone call from a psychologist in Silver Springs, Maryland, who told me that he was a member of a Masonic lodge in Maryland with George Bush, and that they attended lodge meetings together. He would not put the statement in writing for me. However, I cannot confirm that he is a Mason or that George Bush was a Mason. I can tell you that the Masonic Lodge has stated officially that George Bush is not a Mason. This is the letter from the Masons dated December the 16th, 1991, that stated that George Bush is not a Mason. But let me give you some more evidence that George Bush knows precisely what this New World Order is that I'm talking about. This is an article that appeared in my Arizona Daily Star, our morning newspaper, on January the 3rd, 1989. The headline reads, Millennium Group expects Bush at 99 Egypt Bash. A millennium is, of course, a 1,000-year period, so this article was telling us that there is a group of people that have formed to celebrate the beginning of the next 1,000-year period. And to show you that this organization is real, this is a copy of their application. A friend of mine joined their group to monitor their activities. So you can join it as well. All you have to do is send in your dues. The article reported, President-elect Bush is spending this New Year's holiday at Camp David, Maryland, but in 10 years he may be in Egypt. Organizers of the Millennium Society say by the way, notice that the group is called the Millennium Society, say he's already committed to ushering in the next century at the Great Pyramid of Cheops at Giza. George Bush is going to be at the Great Pyramid of Cheops near Cairo, Egypt, to welcome in the millennium starting on January the 1st, the year 2000. The article says that George Bush sent the group a telegram that read, Barbara and I wish you the best of luck in the next year, and we're looking forward to your celebration in Egypt in 1999. Notice that he acknowledged that he will be there on New Year's Eve, 1999, to welcome in the new year on the next morning. And he's going to be there at the Great Pyramid of Giza, the temple of initiation into Lucifer worship. This is an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal of June the 27th, 1988, that confirms the story placed in the Arizona Daily Star. And this is an article that appeared in Time magazine in 1992 that talked about the great event, so it is true. George Bush will be at the Great Pyramid of Giza near Cairo, Egypt, for the beginning of a 1,000-year millennium, a period that he chose to call the 1,000 Points of Light. And he will be there for a very specific purpose, one that is both shocking and scary. I will discuss that reason in the next session. Let me summarize all that we've learned so far. The New World Order is coming to the world on January the 1st, the year 2000. It will last for 1,000 years, and George Bush will be there to see the beginning of it. George Bush will be standing near the pyramid, and at midnight, he will watch the planet Jupiter light up, signifying that there is now a second God in the universe, and that Lucifer will be taking his rightful place in ruling the affairs of men on this earth. This will be a symbolic act, signifying that the eye of the sun god is going to land somehow on the top of the pyramid and take up residency inside. John Anthony West, in his book Serpent in the Sky, one we looked at before, says this: since the closing of the temple at the end of the Pharaonic Empire and the beginning of the Christian era, man has been without the essential guide of the sacred science as a means of becoming truly human. That means that somehow the temple will be reopened for Lucifer worship on January the 1st, the year 2000 AD. Manly P. Hall adds one more clue that the pyramid will be reopened soon. He wrote in his book entitled The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, enter the temple in reverence, for it is in truth the dwelling place of a great spirit, the spirit of Masonry. This is why George Bush is going to be at the Great Pyramid. That pyramid will be opened again as a temple of Lucifer worship, and George Bush will be there. But how can George Bush be involved in a Luciferian conspiracy that lasting 1,000 years? He loves children. How can George Bush be involved in a 1,000-year Luciferian conspiracy? He loves parades. He couldn't be involved. But all of the evidence is that he knows precisely what he's doing and what he's saying. He knows that the New World Order is Luciferic, and he looks forward to their bringing us a 1,000-year reign of this government. Quite simply, George Bush knows that the New World Order is Luciferic. Now let me bring it all together to show you further evidence that he knows. I believe George Bush knows. He's looking forward, as I said. This is a picture of George Bush. I'm sorry, I got one slide behind. George Bush does know, and now we're going to see a picture of George Bush speaking at the United Nations on October the 1st, 1990. This is a transcript of that speech as printed in the New York Times newspaper on October the 2nd, 1990, and this is what George Bush told the United Nations about the year 2000 and a coming millennium. As we look to the future, the calendar offers up a convenient milestone, a signpost by which to measure our progress as a community of nations. The year 2000 marks a turning point, beginning not only the turn of the decade, but not only the turn of the century, but also the turn of the millennium. He said this about the New World Order: the United Nations can help bring about a new day. He went on, it is in our hands to press forward to cap. Notice that he used the word cap, like he would cap the pyramid with a missing capstone. So it is in our hands to press forward to cap an historic movement towards a new world order. This is an article written by George Bush in the Parade magazine of July the 2nd, 1989. I'm going to read the paragraph that I can't show you there, but it's in this little paragraph here in yellow. Actually, in blue, forgive me. This is a close-up of that page just to show you that I'm not misquoting him in this quote. This is what George Bush wrote. I'm going to read it all the way through first, and then I'll go back over it one thought at a time. George Bush wrote, that desire for freedom from tyranny inspired the world and still does. Look on the back of any dollar bill and you'll see it. The Great Seal of the United States bears the motto Novus Ordo Seclorum, meaning a new order of the ages. Now let me comment on each thought in the article. Mr. Bush talked about that desire for freedom from tyranny. Remember that this conspiracy believes that religion is tyranny, and that they want to replace religion with the thought that man can rule the universe with the use of reason. So it is possible that George Bush is talking about the need to destroy religion, just like the communists, the Illuminati, the socialists, the Masons, and the New Age religion have all dreamed. And I think that's possible. Look on the back of any dollar bill. Mr. Bush wrote, the Great Seal of the United States bears the motto Novus Ordo Seclorum. So here he is acknowledging that the New World Order is shown on the back of our dollar bill in the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum. Then he goes on to define it a little differently than I do. He calls it the New Order of the Ages. I'll accept that definition instead of mine, which is the New World Order, because George Bush elsewhere talked about the New World Order. So it is fair to conclude that George Bush knows about the New World Order. George Bush knows about the Novus Ordo Seclorum. George Bush knows about the 1,000-year millennium. And he knows that it all starts on the morning of January the 1st, the year 2000. He has told us in his own words. Now, to end this lecture, let me ask the question that all of America should be asking: what is the solution? As I've said before, and as I have attempted to approve as an historian, this conspiracy is Luciferian. It is supported by a religious belief in Lucifer, also called Satan the Devil. This conspiracy has been causing the death of billions of people on this earth for nearly 6,000 years. This conspiracy is intrinsically evil. It does not have men's best interest at heart, and moral people must do all within their power to expose it and stop it. So here's the answer. I think it was someone like St. Thomas Aquinas who wrote, "We are to work as if it's all up to us and pray as if it was all up to God." So here are the two answers. We are to work to expose it, and we are to pray for God to end it. And the answer is in the Bible. The New Testament says this in Ephesians 5:11, "And have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them." The word reprove also means expose. So we are not to cooperate with the works of this conspiracy, and we are to spend our lives in exposing their works. For about 13 hours, I have been trying to show you that I have uncovered a gigantic conspiracy in the world, and that this conspiracy is headed by a religion based on a belief in Lucifer the devil. I've tried to expose this conspiracy as an historian, but the answer is a religious one. This is a group of us at the 33rd Degree Masonic Temple in Washington, D.C. in September of 1990. Notice that we prayed by actually laying hands on the temple. We prayed that God would loose this nation from the bondage of Freemasonry, because if the bonds are not broken, we will get Lucifer's 1,000 points of light. So once again, very simply, the answer is work and prayer. Because the Creator God of the Bible has told us this in the Old Testament. 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. "If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and forgive their sin, and will heal their land." Notice that the Creator God has told us we have a 4-step program to save this country. We are to humble ourselves. This means that we must acknowledge that the Creator God exists in the universe, and acknowledge Him as the Lord of the universe, not us. We are to pray to that God. Number 3, we are to seek His face. And number 4, we are to turn from our wicked ways. If we do this, the Creator God promises to do 3 things in return. He promises that He will hear from heaven, that He will forgive our sins, and then number 3, He promises to heal our land. A good summary of this problem was offered by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, a Russian defector. He saw the very same New World Order while he lived in Russia. He lived in it for all of his life before he defected to this nation, and he warned us. Over a half-century ago, meaning about the time of 1917, the time of the Communist Revolution in his native Russia, while I was still a child, I recall hearing a number of old people offer the following explanation for the great disasters that have befallen Russia. He was referring to the great disasters of the Communist Revolution in Russia that killed as many as 42 million people. In other words, he was asking these people who lived through the Communist Revolution why it had happened. He explained that he received this answer from those he talked to. They told him that man has forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. That's why all of this has happened in America. Quite simply, we have forgotten God. Now, if you do not know God, may I humbly suggest that you get to know Him as soon as possible, because He is looking for you, but you have to find Him. The Masons claim that man cannot know God. Carl Claudia, 33rd Degree Mason, wrote this on page 157 of his book entitled Introduction to Freemasonry. We cannot prove God. He wrote, proof is the result of logic, and logic is the process of the mind. They say that man's reason leads him away from God, and I say that man's reason leads him to God. So if my little pamphlet entitled God Exists can help you find the Creator God through the use of science, logic, and reason, please let me know by writing to the address that will follow at the end of this lecture. One of the first quotes we read in this lecture was this one. Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, a socialist, wrote, Our principle is atheism in religion, anarchy in politics, and no property in the economic sphere, and what he was describing was quite simply the New World Order. I believe that you can now see that this is precisely what George Bush wanted, what Fidel Castro, the communist, wanted, what Mikhail Gorbachev, another communist, wanted, and Adolf Hitler, the German socialist, wanted. Mr. Proudhon was right. Now we're going to read two final quotes together. I will not add any of my comments, and I'm asking you to see if you have learned enough of the coded, concealed language to understand just what these authors are saying. If I taught you anything in the last 13 hours, you will understand the hidden language, because these quotes are saying something that only those who have knowledge will understand. This is the first of the two quotes, and this is what Albert Pike wrote. If men were all Masons and obeyed with all their hearts their mild, or her mild and gentle teachings, that would be a paradise. For this is the Masonic creed: believe in God's infinite benevolence, wisdom, and justice. Hope for the final triumph of good over evil, and for perfect harmony as the final result of all the concords and discords of the universe. If you understood what I've been teaching you for the last 12 or 13 hours, that quote will have made some sense. And the second of the quotes is from Manly P. Hall, who wrote this: "The cries of the mystery speak again, bidding all men welcome to the house of light. The great civilization of materiality has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned and is destroying its creator. Religion wanders aimlessly in the maze of theological speculation. Only the illumined reason can carry the understanding part of man upward to the light. Into this band of the elect, those who have chosen the life of knowledge, of virtue, and of utility, the philosophers of the ages invite you. I'm hoping that you understood. This was coded language that I'm hopeful that you can now understand, because if you did, I did my job. I've taught you how to understand the future of the world. Please allow me to interrupt this lecture just a little before its ending by telling you that at the end of this lecture, I will provide you with my mailing address so that you can write for a catalog of the materials that I've written and produced. I believe you will find that these books, booklets, and videos are the best research in the market, and that they are worthy of your consideration. Now let me begin to close with this quote from General Douglas MacArthur, a great World War II hero. General MacArthur addressed the West Point cadets when he retired on the 12th of May, 1962. He spoke about a code of conduct and chivalry. For all hours and for all time, it is an expression of the ethics of an American soldier: duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate why you ought to be what you can be. They are your rallying point to build courage when courage seems to fail. Always. I come back to West Point. Always. There are echoes and re-echoes. Duty. Honor. Country. Let me end with this last quote. One man who hadn't forgotten God was Pope Felix III. He wrote this in the early 6th century. Not to oppose error is to approve it, and indeed to neglect to confound evil men when we can do it is no less a sin than to encourage them. I say, It is time to oppose error. It is time to confound evil men. It is time to oppose the New World Order. Thank you so very much, and may God bless America.